Dr. Underly. Good morning. How are you?
I'm well, thank you so much. I was just thinking we have no snow where I'm at in Southwest Wisconsin.
No, and
It's brown.
we had none last week, and that finally we finally got about 5 inches yesterday. But this has not been your typical winter at all. No, very much
No,
so.
it hasn't.
But
Yeah.
this is the time of year when people have to be thinking about these elections in February and April, and I'm going to want to
hmm
get to those and your campaign in just a bit. But while we have you here in your capacity of kind of being the chief educational morale booster for all of us in Wisconsin this month, you mentioned that this is Career and Technical Education Month, and a good reminder of some of the long term view that you have to have in education. It's not just the lessons that you learn this week, but where these lessons are going to take you. Can you tell me more about the Career and Tech Education Month?
Yeah, so it's really when you think about the classes that get kids excited about being in school, they're often the career and tech ed classes. And it's not like it was when you and I were in high school, Pat. It's more like when I was in high school, career, or I should say tech ed, was like welding, auto shop, wood shop kind of stuff. But um, since then, I mean, nationally, we've done so much to raise the standards of what we consider to be career in tech ed. And so it's like culinary, it's art and design, it's engineering, lots of different things, business, health occupations. And so we raise awareness. It's something that we want to invest in because we want our kids to be career or college ready by the time they graduate high school so that they know when they graduate what they want to do with their lives and not waste any time or money as it might be. So it's just exciting because when you talk to these kids, they're so engaged in what they're doing in school, and it's just really reassuring. I mean, they're going to be all right, and it just feels to me like this is the stuff that we need to continue to invest in because it helps our workforce and our economy and really the happiness and well-being of our citizens.
Well, and it's got to give you a feeling of satisfaction watching these kinds of things unfold in Wisconsin schools, and so that has me transitioning to what you would contend are your own accomplishments over these past 4 years, accomplishments in spite of some of the political challenges in the Capitol these days. So let me ask it this way, Dr. Underly. There are three candidates, yourself included, for State Superintendent of Public Instruction. Tell us why voters should consider you to be the best one who is suited to win and to serve in this role.
Yeah, well, thanks for that question because I think that, yeah, there certainly are a lot of challenges. I mean, not just in our capital, but in the national capital, it seems as well. But here I am, I'm the number one advocate for public schools. I mean, that is the number one job of Wisconsin State Superintendent of Public Instruction. And as it would be, of the three of us, I'm the only one talking about school funding. The budget that I proposed will address all the needs that our schools have had so that they don't have to continue to go to referendum. This budget is what kids need. When you talk about stability and consistency, I mean, it's really chaotic right now. I mean, we need someone who will stand up for public schools, for all kids, all teachers, and all families, and someone who has been proven to do this. And we're building, or I should say, I'm building off of the stuff that works. And our school districts deserve a lot of credit. Like we were just talking about expanding career and technical education. We can get the funding. We've gotten grants from the federal government in the past 4 years on CTE, teacher recruitment and retention, expanding mental health and access to kids. And then in the state, we passed this bipartisan literacy law so that literacy instruction, science, and evidence-based. We've been advocating for fair funding for our schools, but like I said, our schools are the ones that are buying into this, and as a result of their implementation, Wisconsin schools are now sixth in the nation, according to U.S. News and World Report. So that's up from 13th in 2020, and we have the highest graduation rate in our state history and one of the highest graduation rates in the country. So it's no accident that when you expand things that work and get kids excited about school, they're going to come and they're going to learn and then they're going to graduate.
It it is arguably the least talked about thing on a daily basis about schools, and that would be standardized tests. And yet, that's the closest thing of an apples to apples barometer that folks can have when they're weighing the effectiveness of our schools. But as I'm doing research into this latest topic about standardized test scores, it's clear that going back to No Child Left Behind, or even further back than that, Wisconsin education has been just on a carousel ride of changing tests and changing standards and changing expectations from Washington D.C. and Madison. And so now there is talk about the changes that were made last year in Wisconsin standardized tests. We talked about it yesterday with Chris Thiel from Milwaukee Public Schools. Can you tell us what it is that's being talked about, what changes were made in the last year, and why you and others made them the way that you did?
Yeah, so the changes were made very transparently, and it wasn't unlike any other former state superintendent, prior to me had done. It's like we get educators to come in, look at the test, and this is our state test, the forward test, and they make recommendations for new standards to add, old standards to take out, and then they also make recommendations to adjust the scoring scale because you're now scoring different items. And so what it really comes down to is that this past summer we raised standards in math and science, and then excuse me, sorry, we added
That's
standards in career
okay.
and tech
Yeah.
ed.
Hmm.
And
Uh,
so I
Go ahead.
wanted the test to mean something. And that's what thousands of educators in Wisconsin who administered the test wanted it to do as well. They wanted it to mean something. So when you're grading kids on it, they didn't want to use a grading scale for a different test, which is what we had been doing previously. And I understand why, because if you say, well, if they have a more challenging grading scale, they're going to rise to that challenge. Um, and but you don't also understand then how kids are doing on the test if you're not grading it accurately, if that makes sense. And so it's really a big distraction, is kind of how I look at it. The critics or the Republicans in the legislature would rather focus on this, which is really not an issue. Um, and instead not talk about the fact that they've been underfunding our schools for the past 15 years. And if they would invest in schools, in public schools, we would see kids doing a lot better in certain areas and certain segments of our population doing a lot better in school. So that's really, I guess, when it comes down to, if it wasn't a political year, this is my feeling, this wouldn't be an issue.
Can you clarify when you talk about changing standards? Does that mean changing like some of the questions in the test? There was a Milwaukee Journal Sentinel article that kind of related it to, you're changing the test so that you're not asking questions about an atlas. You're changing the question to read about a map because like no kid picks up an atlas anymore. So we're talking like the content. When you talk about changing standards, it's almost like the questions, the terminology. Is that what's changing?
Yeah, sometimes, and sometimes it's higher too, like higher, more challenging questions. Kids today are learning things that are more challenging than when we were in school. Like I think any parent who has helped their kids with their homework probably understands what I'm saying here. That third grade math was not, like, third grade math today is not third grade math when I was in school. And so I think that that's really part of it. Like we're constantly adding things. Like history continues on. So we're adding things, adding context, changing, because the way kids have learned has changed. And so we want to make sure that we're putting in things that are relevant, but then it's not just about the kid here. And bear with me for a second. It's about the instruction, and for teachers to understand what areas of instruction their classes are not doing well in, and or maybe specific kids. And so we can identify when we have a test like the forward exam, what areas of literacy or what areas specifically in math, what skills we need to challenge more kids on, or what skills we need to provide more intervention in. So that's really what it comes down to.
Okay. And you've talked about obviously with a state with a $4 billion surplus after years of chronic underfunding of education, there are ample resources that could be there. And yet, from the current 50 million that's tied up for literacy programs to the hundreds of millions of dollars that go to voucher schools. Let me ask the question this way. It is becoming quite clear in some other states. We talked to our colleague Cam Stevenson in Arizona about a week ago. And other states, people who had for years supported voucher and charter schools have suddenly realized that its explosive growth in their budgets is a real fiscal threat. So my question to you is, if elected to another term, what lessons can you help Wisconsin take from what is happening in other states?
Right. And I think you just really nailed it. I mean, the real issue here isn't about the test scores. It's really about funding. And by blaming kids and blaming our schools, our public schools specifically, um, the conservatives are making this argument that school vouchers and privatization is better. And that's absolutely not the case. And we've seen that in other states play out where voters have had an opportunity to vote on statewide referendums if they want it. We never had that opportunity in Wisconsin. We never had a statewide vote on it. And when we see these large referendums, especially in our urban districts, like the most recent one was Madison School District in November, and then prior to that, Milwaukee. And then we've got a big one coming up in Kenosha and Racine. And when we look at the size of these referendums, it's because our public school budgets have just been decimated by the expansion of school vouchers and privatization. So there are hundreds of millions of dollars are coming out of our urban school districts. And now this is per year. And now we are seeing it expand statewide to other school districts that traditionally didn't have to manage paying for two systems.
And yet here we are now paying for two systems in the state. So let me ask a final question here then. Again, if reelected, what in your mind is the best path forward with you at the helm of the Department of Public Instruction, DPI, and this current legislature? What would you like to see over the next 2 to 4 years?
Well, I would like to see an investment in our public schools, and I would like to see us stop the expansion of school vouchers. Like, I know right now it's more challenging. I can't get rid of vouchers. The legislature could. But in the meantime, because I don't see that happening, I would like them to at least put a pause on it and to stop it, because we really need to be investing in the system that meets the needs of all kids, accepts all kids, and invests in our local communities, and that's our public schools.
And it is something that's creating, like I said, it's headaches in areas that never thought they'd have to deal with this, and also from elected officials who, again, are seeing that what was once a very tiny pilot program is not so tiny anymore. Dr. Jill Underly is running for a second term as State Superintendent of Public Instruction. She and two other candidates are on the ballot 2 weeks from today. In-person absentee voting is underway at your local clerk's office. Jill Underly, thank you again so much. Always good to chat with you.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Pat.